Hey everyone, I'm Will, and you're watching the Pixelists. And today we're going to be talking about The Legend of Vox Machina, Episode 3. But before we do that, I have a quick confession. No, I don't actually sound like this. I actually sound like this. I just am a guy that likes to do accents at random times, so that's just going to have to be something we deal with moving forward. And just wanted to let you guys know that. But moving forward, spoiler warning. I don't know what that was, but spoiler warning. And sorry for the redundancy on these intros. I just worry that, if this happens to be the first video, what was this? If this happens to be the first video somebody stumbles across, I want them to be forewarned. Now, clearly, if you're clicking on an Easter egg video, you probably know that you're walking into spoiler territory, but nonetheless, I have seen all of campaign 1, 2, and I'm up to date on 3. So little Easter eggs, references, details I notice could very well spoil something that is not yet to happen in the show. If that's not the experience you want, your back button is right, I think, here on your browser. So click that, but, come back after sometime if you want. What was I saying? I should redo this. Yes, I should. But I'm not going to. You know why? Because we have an organic relationship thing happening right here, I'm not going to censor myself. You shouldn't censor yourself either. I mean, unless you're like being vulgar around kids or something. Anyway, what am I talking about? Back to the spoilers. With all that being said, I will try to walk the line of explaining references and Easter eggs without giving away surprises or reveals that are cool. Obviously, that's going to depend on a Easter egg by Easter egg basis, but just know that I will do my best to try not to spoil things, but sometimes it's going to be inevitable, right? All right, this intro, when is it ending, you ask? Soon. I just wanted to take a quick second again to thank everyone for all of the kind comments that we've been receiving over the past couple videos. It really does mean a lot. I read every single comment, which I know it's not like we get 10,000 or anything, so it's not that impressive, but I do. So, if I missed an Easter egg, drop us a line. If you just want to talk about Vox Machina or Critical Role or anything, like, drop me a comment. It really does make my day to engage with you guys. And I love talking about Critical Role, clearly. So, it's a win-win situation, really. And and forgive me for the quick YouTube spiel, but, the comments, the likes, and the subscribes, they really do go such a long way for like fledgling channels like ours. So, press that button. I think it's down here. Just one of these sides. Just press it, You got nothing to lose. And if you do press it, maybe I'll end this intro. Statistically, I figure at least one person may be subscribed right then. And so, to you, thanks for ending the intro. For everyone else, you really are a hero. Anyway, moving forward, before we jump into episode 3 proper, I wanted to touch on something from episode 1, but really for all the episodes moving forward. The cast did reveal that they hid a bunch of dice in the show as Easter eggs. And I think I pointed out maybe 1 or 2 thus far in the previous Easter egg videos, but I missed this one, which is the very start of the show. The lens flare here is a D20. And there's also one other one that I found that I had previously missed, which is basically it's not just a D20, but it's like all the dice from D&D on the door of Amon, along with the Critical Role symbol there. So I just wanted to kind of get this announcement out there so that the rest of you can kind of be spying for these dice hidden in the world, and hopefully we can find them all. Unfortunately, even knowing this now, I don't think I found a single dice in episode 3, which there's gotta be some, right? So if you spied any, let me know in the comments. All right, so our episode kicks off with our first proper look at Whitestone. This isn't really a reference or an Easter egg, it just is a fact, but since we kind of got a quick glimpse of it during the Percy song in episode 1, but this is our real first look at it. And just, as a fanboy, this is such a cool moment to see Whitestone. I can't wait to like visit it proper and just see everything, mainly the Sun Tree, but it deserved a shout out. So the episode starts with this flashback sequence of Percy and his family in Whitestone, and there's a few details I want to touch on here, but first and foremost is this book that Percy and his mother are reading. And this may be a stretch, but if the past 3 episodes are any indication, there are so many details and Easter eggs that the cast has hidden that any type of explicit detail like this, I have to think is intentional. and by explicit detail, I mean the fact that there is this image on the left side of the book. On the right side, we just have scribble line filler, and there's a book later in this episode that we'll talk about that is also 95% filler. So the fact that they took the time to animate the puppet on the left side, to me, that screams intention, so I'm going to make my reach. I think that this puppet is alluding to the relationship between Percy and Orthax. Now, if you don't know who Orthax is and you haven't seen C1, don't Google it. But that's my best guess, and I feel like it fits quite nicely and is a nice little nod to that. So, take it for what you will. Maybe I'm making this up, but I see intention there. Next up in this opening sequence, we just have a fun little Easter egg that Taliesin actually voiced his father here in the scene. And he actually said he tried to channel his grandfather in order to do this voice. So I just thought that was fun. All right, here we have a blink and you miss it Easter egg. So if you'll notice, there's a sword protruding from Percy's dad's chest, and that's a nod to the fact that he is dead. Totally kidding. So actually what I want to point out here is the little pendant on his shirt that is of the sun. That is just a great little nod to the fact that in Whitestone, they worship Pelor, aka the Dawn Father, the god of the sun, summer, agriculture, and things of that nature. Now, there's a long kind of storied history of the lore and stuff of gods and everything in Exandria, and I'm not going to go that deep on it for this moment, but I just thought it was a nice little touch that he's got the sun pendant on his lapel there. So we come to realize that this sequence is actually a nightmare that Percy is having, and he is reliving the Briarwoods and their people coming into Whitestone, taking over and murdering his whole family. And this was just cool to see because this story that's kind of being, quickly covered here in this nightmare is basically exactly Percy's backstory from the D&D campaign. All of the characters had these little intros that they would play before each Twitch stream started back when they first began, and this was Percy's in a nutshell. So it's just really cool to see this. But the fun little Easter egg here at the end of the nightmare is this black smoke that is swirling toward Percy, and this is definitely another nod to Orthax. And then we get our first look at Percy's iconic Plague Doctor mask. He also, as I'm sure many of you know, dons it at the end of this episode, but these are things that are just so cool to finally see animated after, having it in your mind palace for so many years. So I had to give it a shout out. So we've got Percy unable to sleep, decides to go walk it off, and lo and behold, who steps out to check on him? Vex. And this is just another example of some little seeds possibly being planted. So we're starting to get some glimpses of Grayskull Keep, and again, they're not going to call it Grayskull Keep in the show for copyright reasons, but until we have a new name, I'm probably just going to keep referring to it as that. And we also get this establishing shot of the outside of it here. And just a fun little fact is Matt, originally mocked up some designs for Grayskull Keep back during the campaign, and when they made the show, he gave them those designs, and he said the artists and the showrunners just used his designs. They didn't embellish it or change it up or anything for the show, and he just was like, wow, I just he didn't expect that of them. He thought they would make their changes. But so what we're seeing here is actually what their keep, quote unquote, looked like during the campaign. So we move on to a little breakfast, and here we have another glimpse of the meta pigeons flying in with Keyleth and even landing on the table here. Also in this scene, if you'll notice, we have Scanlan eating some chicken, and he is actually the only one that is eating chicken for breakfast. And this is a nod to some events later in the campaign where Scanlan only serves chicken to everyone for breakfast. So next I'm going to talk about two scenes together here since they're about the same thing, but the Vax and Grog prank war. I am so excited to see this evolve over the course of the show. This was one of my favorite aspects of campaign 1. Just the frenemy relationship between Grog and Vax is just so good. And so I love that they're translating it to this ball tap game initially, but I expect it to even evolve beyond that, and we'll just get, hopefully a whole myriad of pranks between them. So next up, we have our second appearance of the big bad evil guy of the campaign, Adore. And I love that they're leaning into this bit because, we mentioned this last episode, but Vox Machina and Doors do not get along. Countless times throughout campaign 1, they struggled with doors. So it's it's just great to see. All right, next up, we probably have my favorite Easter egg of the episode, and get your counters ready for how many times I say that, but I think this one probably does take the cake. The banner here behind Allura and hanging around Grayskull Keep depicts a rock, ROC, like the bird, and then a bunch of cows beneath it. And this is a reference to a very infamous, maybe isn't the right word, but an episode of Campaign 1 where the party decides to transform themselves into cows in order to bait out a rock that is terrorizing some local farmers and stuff. And of course, hilarity ensues.
Hey, there's a cowbell.
Great. It will help the ruse. Here's my plan.
Okay.
We're all cows. Is that an okay plan?
I like it.
Yeah.
I'm kind of into this plan.
All right, I
But
guess.
doesn't that essentially make us the bait?
Yes, we're our own bait. Are you cool with that?
Totally.
Should one of us maybe not be a cow?
Good idea.
Well, here's
You.
the thing. Maybe a few of us should not be cows because only a few people are going to have the ability to turn out of being a cow once they are a cow, unless they take damage.
We went from all cows to pretty much no one's a cow.
No. Keyleth is definitely a cow.
5
No, I mean I didn't mean
No,
it
no,
like that.
I can
Keyleth.
make us
It's
all.
fine.
You are
It's
very,
fine.
very lovely.
I can make us
So
all
lovely.
cows.
It's okay. What Vax said was way worse earlier.
How do you come out of being a cow if you are one?
I can get rid of it.
You do.
Yes, I can make us all cows.
Let's do it. How?
On and
When
off
else are we
switch.
all gonna be cows?
On and off cow switch.
Come on. Unless it kills him instantly, we'll be fine.
So, as much as I would like to continue milking that moment, unfortunately, we have to move on. But we're moving on to something just as good, actually, because next we have the party dressing up to the nines to go to this banquet, and Scanlan Shorthalt, is wearing what I can only refer to as a cup, I guess. And the references here are twofold. One of which is this cup is using the same colors as the polysexual flag. And, this is obviously just a nod to Scanlan's sexuality. But also, this is a nod to Sam Riegel's real life costumes during some of the Critical Role live streamed events. Or they're all live streamed, but they were live streamed live in front of an audience. And I'll show you that now.
Children, shield your eyes. I present to you Sam Riegel! Hide your kids, hide your wives, hide your faces. It's Sam Riegel.
So yeah, I'm not sure there are words that exist in the English diction that could possibly eloquently transition from that. So here's Matt. We have the Matt NPC for the third time, and I love this because with each episode he appears in, I feel like more and more confident that they are going to sneak him into every episode, which I've said this once, I've probably said it twice. Let's make it a third time. That just makes me super happy. On this subject, while we're here, though, we also spied Sprinkle in both episode 1 and episode 2. So I had my eyes peeled looking for Sprinkle in this episode, hoping that they would maybe sneak in our favorite weasel into every episode as well. But I didn't see him. So if anyone else happened to notice a super secret Sprinkle Easter egg, please let me know, because I'm still holding on to like a very small piece of hope that maybe he was in here somewhere and I just missed it. So next up, we've got a couple of pretty cool Easter eggs. The party is making their way into the banquet proper, and as any banquet that's worth its salt has, we've got an announcer that is announcing the entrance of all of these dignitaries and important people. And this announcer is played by Darren DePaul, who is a very talented voice actor and member of the extended Critical Role family. And this isn't really related to what's happening on screen, but this is still worth sharing. The crazy thing about Darren DePaul is that he's much older than Matt, and back in the day, he knew Matt's mom, and they played D&D together. So when Darren came and guested during campaign 1, he played the same exact character that he played, 20 years prior with Matt's mom. And that's just, I don't know, that's just one of like the coolest little things, Easter eggs that happened during campaign 1. So wanted to mention it here for anybody that wasn't familiar with that. And the next little cool Easter egg here is who Darren introduces before he introduces Vox Machina.
Craghammer, Grodim Greyspine.
So in case you couldn't hear that, he says, from Craghammer, Grodim Greyspine. And that's just, it's not like a really big Easter egg or anything, but Craghammer is a city in Exandria, and it's actually the city that Campaign 1 started in. It's where we pick up kind of mid-adventure from the home game when they transition to a Twitch stream. And Greyspine is the royal family there, and they own the mine. It's a dwarven city, and it's mostly underground, and the Greyspines own these sets of mines. And I don't know, when I just heard the name, it triggered those memories of early campaign 1 for me, so I wanted to mention it here. All right, next up, we've got another little couple goals situation. This older couple here that, Scanlan is kind of messing with is voiced by Matt Marisha. So that's the second time that we know of that they have voiced a couple of, paired characters on screen. So I'm interested to see how many more times something like that happens. All right, this next part is one of my favorite parts of the episode, just for the awesome parallel to the original campaign. But we have Percy reacting to the name Briarwood. He's shocked, kind of processing trauma in this moment. And it is so similar to exactly what Taliesin did in the campaign when a similar kind of situation happened. It didn't play out exactly in the same way that it's playing in the show, but the essence of it is the same.
This to Lady and Lord Briarwood as soon as possible, thank you. All right, so first of all, I want to welcome you all back. It's been a few weeks since we've seen each other. I've been recently given word that you so unceremoniously appeared in the center of the Lyceum, not but 12 hours ago. Worse for wear. So, I would like to know, first off, why you've returned in the center of our city, and well, I want to see how your well-being has been these past few weeks. I apologize, I'm a bit scattered. I've had a few things on my mind as of late. But yes, how is Vox Machina?
If I may. We didn't choose to dump ourselves right in the middle of the city.
That moment is just one of the iconic moments from Campaign 1, for me at least. Like, I vividly remember sitting watching that episode and hearing the name Briarwood and just immediately being like, oh shit, like, it's happening. And just watching Taliesin have that reaction in real time as well, just, it gives me goosebumps. And the show did it justice. I loved it. But so now that this has happened, the party is kind of coming together, and Vax offers to go investigate, with his stealthy rogue ways and see what he can come up with. But the party says, you know what, we need some sort of safe word or danger word that, can alert us that you're in trouble if things hit the fan. And this is where they turn to Grog, and he comes up with Chenga. And in Campaign 1, all throughout Campaign 1, honestly, they did this exact same thing. They came up with a word to alert each other, and the word was Jenga, like the board game. Well, is Jenga a board game? Let's not worry about it. But so when I first watched this, I thought it literally just was Jenga. But now, having watched it, a few times, it is definitely Chenga, which that's a really clever way to get around that copyright and essentially still be, like 99.9% the same. So really liked this. So as Vax, sneaks off to go see what he can find, the rest of the party make their way into the banquet, where they are greeted by Kima and Allura. And, if you're keen-eyed here, you will notice that their outfits seem to be coordinated, matching colors. So perhaps, a little nod to something we may find out in the future. This next part is one of my favorite little attentions to detail in the whole episode. So at the beginning of this episode and a few different times in the past 2 episodes, we've got mention of Percy, and his sophistication, his manners, his elegance, and kind of being annoyed with the rest of the party for being so crass and, uncivilized. I think even at the beginning of this episode, he mentions to Alora, like, how excited he is about the banquet and that, don't worry, like, he'll make sure everyone has the proper etiquette and manners. Yet that juxtaposed with what happens here when the sovereign and his wife enter and everyone is supposed to stand. Percy, the king of manners and etiquette, does not stand. He is too focused on his hatred of the Briarwoods. And, it takes, I think, either Keyleth or Vex to actually kind of lift him up. And I just, love it. Okay, sound the alarm. We may have a classic Will is making a reach type of moment here, but I'm going to go for it. The necklaces between Percy and Vex, they look like they're matching to me, or maybe a little his and hers action. So, I don't know, but I'm going to take credit for it anyway. So now we switch to Vax and his shenanigans, and I love this moment because to me, this screams natural 20. As in, Vax rolled a natural 20 on his stealth check, and so that is how he is able to skillfully evade this guard, and I love it. Following this, we have another awesome Vax moment where he pulls out Simon, his belt that can turn into a snake, and uses it to distract the guards.
I yank off my serpent belt and throw it as far as I can. Not as far as I can, like 20 feet, and set it in motion. So there's now a snake in the hole 20 feet in front of these guys.
Meanwhile, back at the banquet, Silas essentially hypnotizes Sovereign Uriel, and I assume this is probably a portrayal of the Charm Person spell from D&D. A little bit more on that later when Silas casts it on Vax. So hold that thought. And but the interesting thing here in this scene is the fact that Keyleth is the one that kind of notices something weird just happened, which interestingly enough, in the Dungeons and Dragons campaign, Keyleth has the highest passive perception, which means she's the best at kind of picking things up like this. So it's cool that they made her the one to notice. And then we have just a couple more Easter eggs at the banquet, one of which being Grog's appetite. Now, if you look at all of Vox Machina's plates, they essentially still have all of their food on the plate, just been nibbling, I'm assuming because of the tense situation happening with Percy right now. And then there's Grog. He has 6 or 7 clean plates, which I just love because, I mean, of course, he's a big burly Goliath. He would eat that much. And I don't know, my headcanon is that those plates weren't brought to him. He just stole those from other guests. And then finally, this isn't like an Easter egg or even a detail that probably many people missed. It is pretty obvious, but I still just like to call attention to these cool moments. So we have Percy shatter this glass, in anger. And then a couple of scenes later, he's clenching his fist and blood starts to pool in his hand because the glass obviously cut him. And yeah, I love that detail. Alrighty, so then we cut back to Vax and we've got some more D&D shenanigans going on here. So he's searching through the room and he comes upon this chest. And the little detail that I love is his little knock on the chest. So what that's referencing is checking for traps, which you need to do often and frequently in D&D, or else you're gonna run into a mimic or run into some poison or an explosion. So I just love that. And then of course we have the high perception / investigation in order to find the secret compartment of this chest. Alrighty, and then as far as the contents of this chest, let's start from left to right. We've got what look to be eyeballs, and then perhaps some spell components, potentially residuum, which is a very powerful spell component. Helps enhance magic, but they also do kind of look like dice, so that may be one of the hidden dice this episode. We've got a dagger, a quill, some papers, then a scary looking Necronomicon-esque book, and then we have some bones. And what's important here is that raven skull on the left. Now I think that has to be a reference to Pate de Rolo, which is Laudna's little companion trinket because it's a corpse of a dead rat, but it has a raven skull for a head. So I feel like that's got to be a nod there. And then finally we have the little vials on the right, which could be alchemical supplies or potions, but I think it may be vials of blood, given that we know Silas to be a vampire. More on that in just a second, but as Vax combs through this book, we stop on one page that has, this eerie looking skull and some symbols, but importantly, the whispered one is written on the right side. Now, if you're familiar with Campaign 1, you know that that is referring to Vecna. Again, if you don't want spoilers, do not Google this stuff. But it'll be interesting because of the same copyright, infringement that we've talked about with various spells and names. Vecna is another that they are not going to be allowed to use. At least, I assume not. So it'll be interesting if they just refer to him as the Whispered One the entire campaign, or if there will be another name given to this entity. But yeah, this is just, again, planting some seeds for, some potential plot lines in the future. All right, back to Vampire Zaddy. Fun little detail here, if you didn't notice, is that when Delilah and Silas are walking down this hallway and past this mirror, Silas has no reflection, as vampires do not cast reflections. Okay, so Silas and Delilah find Vax in the room, and I've got a few things I want to talk about here. First and foremost, Silas does his hypnotic effect on Vax just like he did on Sovereign Uriel earlier. And earlier I mentioned that I thought that this was probably the Charm Person spell. However, I remembered that vampires have an innate ability just called Charm, so that's definitely what Silas is doing here. Although functionally, it's basically the exact same thing as Charm Person. And how that works is, you put them under your hypnosis, but if then they are to be attacked by either you or your allies, they basically have a chance to break out of it. And that's what happens with Vax here. All right, other than that, this scene, oh my gosh, just like the Percy scene when he first hears the Briarwoods earlier, I specifically recall watching this scene on the live Twitch stream back in the day, and they just did it such justice. Now I'm gonna play this out, and then I'll show you the original just so you can kind of compare and see how faithful they were to what was going on.
And you look delicious.
You feel the hand of Lord Briarwood slam on your other shoulder.
Yeah.
Don't worry. You look delicious.
And he pulls you into the room as she closes the door behind, and that's where we're gonna end.
Why? Why do you do these things?
Jenga! We have a safe word for a reason!
Jenga! No!
That's cool.
So, here you are,
We're in range.
right there. Lord Briarwood is behind you.
Yeah.
Lady Briarwood is over here by the edge of the bed. These are the two windows. This is the layout of the room here. You guys can see that all right there.
I gotta admit, it's so cool to be going through these old episodes to find these clips and just re-experience these moments, just with the added perspective of just having seen an animated version now. It's so crazy because a lot of these episodes I haven't seen in years. So anyways, in case that was confusing, the reason there were two clips there of the same moment was because, if you didn't notice, when Silas says, you look delicious, Matt ended their Dungeons & Dragons session right after that moment, kind of like a cliffhanger. So that's why in the next clip, it was the next week, and that's why he's setting up the battlefield and everything. So just wanted to clarify in case anyone was thrown off by that. But anyway, so we have Vax, and he just bolts through the glass window, which is exactly what he did in the campaign. And, he takes a pretty rough spill and gets up from the fountain and says Changa, which in the show, we have Vex, I'm guessing through some sort of like twin connection, she kind of realizes something is wrong. I don't think the implication here is that she literally heard him whisper Changa. But in the D&D campaign, they did hear him whisper Jenga because they had a special magical item that was this earring that not everyone in the party had, but a lot of them had, that basically, think of it like a Bluetooth headpiece basically, and they could communicate magically through their earrings. So those aren't in the show, or at least they haven't been. I don't know why they wouldn't include them yet if they were planning to, so I imagine they're not going to be in the show. But yeah, just a little interesting distinction. I guess we have a magic twin connectivity instead. Anyways, we cut back to Vax getting his ass kicked, and I just thought this was a nice touch here that Vax grabs a shard of the broken glass since he still does not have his weapon to try and attack Silas with. So now the rest of Vox Machina has arrived just in time, and we get to see Keyleth's first display of her wild shape ability, where she has turned herself into a hawk. And the great little detail here is they didn't do this just to, show off one of her cool abilities. They did this for a reason. Hawks have what is called keen sense in D&D, which basically means they are really good at finding things, with their eyesight. So again, the party does not know where Vex is. They don't have those magical earrings. All they're going off of right now is Vex's, ominous feeling. So what do? They just have to look for him. So what better way to do that than through the eyes of a hawk? And here we just have the perfect frenemy line of no one kills Vex but me. This actually happened in the campaign, but it didn't happen during this moment. But I feel like it slots in perfectly here regardless.
So you take 6 points of backhand bludgeoning damage as Grog just whack, 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 the echo from the impact.
And I say, no one kills you but me.
So this is where the fight really gets going, and right off the bat, the party realizes that Silas can regenerate, and they might be in trouble. And this is because, again, he is a vampire, and vampires in D&D are very powerful. One of their abilities is that they just regenerate health every single round, unless the damage is radiant damage. So more on that in a second. Now, while Grog was drinking ale and visiting brothels, Silas was studying the blade. And what a blade it is. We get freaking Craven Edge in glorious, beautiful animation. This sword, oh my god, this sword. One of the coolest items ever. And it's, if you can't tell from these clips, it's badass. It literally gets more powerful as it drinks the blood of your enemies. This sword, let's just say I cannot wait to see more from it. All right, so what's Delilah got up her sleeve? So she's been doing this like black smoke, lightning kind of travel move, and I believe this is Misty Step. Misty Step is a teleportation-esque ability in D&D that Delilah did have in the campaign. She also had Dimension Door, which is another portal type ability, but I don't think it's that. So I'm guessing this is a representation of Misty Step. Now, Keyleth here casts what I think is Insect Swarm on Delilah, and she reflects it seemingly, throws it back at them. Now, there is no official reflect spell in D&D. There is some playtest / like homebrew stuff, so it could be that, but it also just might be a colorful representation of Counterspell, even though Counterspell doesn't, turn your attack back on your attacker. But it could be this magical item called the Ring of Spell Turning, which if you roll a natural 20 under some circumstances, you can turn a spell back on their attacker. Now, I don't recall Delilah having that magic item, but maybe she did. And also, maybe this is nothing. It doesn't need an explanation. It could just be a cool part of the battle, right? But wanted to throw out a couple possibilities for anyone that was interested. So we cut back to Grog, who has been having a rough time with Silas, namely because of the vampiric regenerative abilities that I mentioned earlier, but also just because Silas is very strong. So here we just have Pike step in and just do a boss move. And this is just such a great representation of like a support class and like a tank class or a DPS class. Pike is buffing our boy Grog. And specifically, I think this is the spell Holy Weapon, which imbues a weapon with radiant energy. So now Grog is dealing radiant damage with that axe. And as you can see, he strikes Silas and actually injures him now. Also, another fun fact you can see here is that Silas once again does not have a reflection in the water. Okay, so now we're going to talk about a big change between the original campaign and the show. In the original campaign, Pike, aka Ashley Johnson, was not there for this encounter. Really long story short, Ashley Johnson was busy with, a lot of different things. So during campaign 1 and during campaign 2, she was absent quite frequently. So, obviously for the show, they probably kind of want to retcon that. I mean, clearly they already are, and they're going to include her in some moments that she may not have been there for. Now, anyway, so all that to say is that her entire, involvement in this episode is new. And so anyway, here, clearly she's the healer and Delilah has had enough and she casts what I believe to be Finger of Death. I mean, this looks like a pretty intense spell with like, knives basically impaling her all over the place. And if you notice, this also cracks her pendant. Now, her pendant was also cracked in the campaign, but remember, like I said, she wasn't here for this. So this is not how her pendant became cracked. In the original campaign, Pike, again, is the healer, but they had this moment where she kind of brutally murdered somebody, and it was some sort of monster, right? So it wasn't like cold-blooded murder, but like they knocked it unconscious and she just walked up and slit its throat. So because of that, as kind of like an alignment penalty, for lack of a better word, Matt said, you know, your holy pendant breaks because you have kind of acted against someone that your god's character should have, if that makes sense. So anyway, it became a thing, and, you know, she kind of went on this quest to like repair it. And, you know, anyway, that's a far cry from what is happening here. You know, here it's just because she got injured, and maybe it's because the magic Delilah is using is like a dark necromantic type of energy, and maybe that is like, you know, the antithesis of the Everlight. And so maybe Delilah's magic is what cracked it here, and, you know, not anything Pike herself did. Now, I know that was very long-winded, but I had to fill you guys in. So anyway, here in a little bit later scene, you know, we'll see her staring at the pendant again, you know, and it being cracked, and that really disturbing her, sorry. And anyway, all of this to say is I'm just interested to see where this story goes now, since in a way, you know, this is going to be brand new for me and for anyone else that watched Campaign 1. So as Silas is going to go for the killing blow on Pike, we get this great moment from Keyleth. Another immense display of power from her. And I love this. I love the characterization they're doing with Keyleth for this show, which is true for the campaign. So it's all in the right spirit and the right heart, of course. But I just love seeing it. Like, I love that they're painting her as this, you know, immensely powerful person. But, you know, she just lacks the self-confidence, the belief, in herself to really be that way all the time. But, you know, when she has the proper motivation, she shines. And then next up, we have a moment to rival the I would like to rage moment from episode 2. We get our first sighting of No Mercy Percy. And oh my gosh, this was so awesome. Again, another moment that played out, at least spiritually, just like it did in the campaign. Blasting Desmond's fingers off was just so brutal, and I loved it. And the Easter egg here, of course, I mean, not that this was hidden or anything, but Percy putting on this mask and the black smoke pouring out of him is another nod to Orthax, which, you know, I mentioned this at the very beginning of this breakdown, the smoke that approaches him at the end of the nightmare. Here it is again. So, you know, those of you that seen Campaign 1, of course, you know what this is. Those of you that haven't, I'm not going to go any more in depth than this, but just, oh man, this is so cool to finally see animated. And I cannot wait for more of this storyline. And finally, full disclosure here, the "Your soul is forfeit" line, one of Percy's iconic lines, but he actually didn't say it in the Desmond encounter in the original campaign. He said it later, but I still love that they kind of slotted it in here because it's so perfect.
You fool. Now your soul is forfeit.
I'm gonna get a little weird, and I'm just taking straight chest shots, and I'm just firing chest shots, and I'm just making a hole the size of a baseball in his chest. And as it happens, as I keep unloading, the gun still breaks, and I'm still pulling the trigger.
You fool, your soul is forfeit! Die! Die!
And finally, to close out this episode, what better way than to give a quick Percy anime boy compilation?
I think of all of the most anime moments of the show, Percy's dark past and tortured soul and dark hair turning white. I'm like, good. That's some classic tortured anime man. I love.
That's right.
Well, yes.
That's Talison's lineage.
Yes, it's tortured anime
I
man.
met Taliesin through our mutual love of anime cosplay and starting out doing voiceover.
Yep.
He has been an anime boy his entire life through and through, and this was his opportunity to just put all of it into one D&D character.
Alrighty, we made it through episode 3 of the Legend of Vox Machina. Finally. No, yeah. So I didn't set out to make a video that is longer than the episode itself, but here we are. So, I mean, let me know your thoughts on if the length of these videos is still okay and interesting. I don't really know how I would shorten it unless I just completely rid of all speculation and just added things that I knew were Easter eggs. But for my money, I love talking about this. I love speculating, but I know that the length may turn some people off on these videos. So let me know your thoughts. But other than that, a quick plug for our podcast. That's what this channel started as and mainly is a podcast channel for me and my buddy Blake talking about all the nerdy things we love, including Critical Role. So we will be doing podcast episodes on all of the Legend of Vox Machina, and our episode on episodes 1 through 3 is currently up on the channel, so you can check that out. And yeah, you can look forward to us doing it for the rest of the season. But we also do episodes on campaign 3 of Critical Role. So if you watch that, definitely check us out. Hopefully, you might find it interesting. But if you don't watch Critical Role, but you're like, I'm kind of digging the Legend of Vox Machina, definitely give Critical Role's campaign proper a chance. We're just at the beginning of campaign 3, so it's a great time to jump in. And Blake and I do episodes on every episode of that as well. And we also do recaps. So if you are brand new to Critical Role, you can use those to catch up real quick and, start watching live with everyone else. And finally, we do have a Twitter. You can find us over at the Pixelists. Pretty simple. And I love engaging with people over there. That's where we'll talk about, live threads for when things are airing, or, that's where you can just find out when we're dropping new videos and everything. So, if you use Twitter, drop us a follow. But otherwise, that's all I got, y'all. It actually is Thursday when I'm finishing up this video, so we have a new episode of Campaign 3 tonight. So stoked. And then tomorrow, 3 new episodes of Vox Machina. So I have a lot more video editing in my future. But I'm excited about it. So again, have a great week, and we'll see you soon.